All right. What's up to anybody that is in the stream right now? Um, Basically, the plan for today is going to be working on some non-metallic metal here on my custom Space Marine chapter. Uh, Basically, the hope for this is to, yeah, just kind of work on some ideas, figure out exactly what colors I'm looking to use, and get this more straightened out. So I'm just gonna get a little bit closer in there and do that. So one thing I have been working on is mainly the torso. So the torso has quite a bit of different colored details. And as you can see there on his sort of head stripe is kind of the look that we're going to be going for. But because the Iron Halo here is a much larger area, I think we can maybe exaggerate the metal a bit more. So I'm going to be working on that today. Let's see. Looks like we might be having a little bit of issues with the camera. Let me see if reactivating it like that is going to do what we need it to. Okay, I think we should be good now. All right. So yeah, basically what we're going to start with is just doing the base coat. I'm actually going to leave some of this in, I think, but we're just going to be kind of going over some more of this area. So what I typically start with is either a Brigadine Brown from Army Painter, but I also have Rhinox Hide. Both of these are very similar in color. The Rhinox Hide is maybe a little bit warmer, which may lean itself a bit more into sort of this reddish copper that I'm going for. But I think I'm going to try the Brigadine for the base coat just to make sure that all the details that are going to be this color are covered. All right. And if you are new to the stream, I really appreciate you stopping by. The hope for these is basically just having a few people come, hang out, do some painting together, and I can kind of show you guys what I'm learning, teach you guys some things you may not have known, and you guys might be able to show me some stuff as well through the chat and that sort of thing. So if you got anything that you're working on, then go ahead and grab that as we truck right along. So yeah, like I said, we're gonna grab this Brigadine Brown, just get just enough on our paintbrush, and begin a base coat here. And like I was saying a second ago, we're gonna paint over a little bit of what we've done so far, because I do think I can push it to be a bit better. So, and I will say that, this project for me is ultimately meaning to be a kind of skill push. So, what I mean by that is that the ultimate goal is to get better at painting. So, I am really pushing my limits on what I've done up to now. Most of my previous work has just been with army painting and getting minis ready for the tabletop, which I'm sure many of you guys may be in that boat. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being in that, especially if that's just what you want to be doing with your hobby time and all of that. And if you're mainly playing games, then it makes sense that you're spending the bulk of your time painting for that, right? So, but for this, my goal is just to push myself, get to a place where I haven't really been before and kind of prepare myself for either, competition level painting or potentially even commission and professional commission level painting. That's something that I want to start offering over on Instagram. So if you are interested in that, there is a link tree in the description. It's got a link over to my Instagram as well as an Amazon affiliate link that shows a lot of the hobby products that I use. I do plan on eventually setting up a specific list of paints, but for the most part, I use Army Painter and Citadel slash Warhammer paints. Those are just the ones that got me into the hobby, so I'm still holding on to those things that I know and that sort of deal. But if you are watching and you're working on something, I'd love to hear what you're working on. If you want to leave that in the chat or the comments, even if you're watching this after we went live, um, I am. I would love to hear all of that stuff, and I will respond as soon as I can to those things. All right. So we're really just focusing on the Iron Halo today. That's going to be our main jam. So I'm not worried too much about the other areas, although the shoulders here will also have this sort of orangey copper tone in them eventually. And then, and you can kind of see here, I've started working out, oh, and as you can see here, I've started working on a little bit of a like silvery gunmetal, similar to what I did for his bolter, or his gauntlet bolters, and that sort of thing. All right, so now that we've got our brigadine down, let's move on to our next color. And I think what I'm feeling for that is we're going to do a little bit of a mix here. We're going to get some molten lava, so a nice orange. And we're going to do about a 50-50 to start, I think. Maybe a little bit more brigadine in there just to give us a bit more of a punchy effect. Try and put my paints back where they go so that way I don't end up with a dozen paint pots all over my desk. All right. Yeah, we're just gonna mix some of that together. Give us a nice kind of mid-tone. And with this guy, we're looking at having the light coming from sort of this angle. So probably like a little bit of golden hour, maybe a little bit less angled than that. So we're going to be mainly catching the edges facing that direction. So I'm going to kind of work in some of these areas that I haven't touched with paint just yet. So these other spikes along the halo that are facing upward, we're just going to go ahead and put that in there. And I don't think I got quite enough yellow here, or orange rather. So I think I'm going to go back in, get a bit more orange in this mix to lighten this up. There we go. So yeah, we're just gonna work our way around here, kind of grabbing and catching any of the edges that would realistically be hit by the light coming from this angle, but also kind of remembering that this is meant to be more of ambient light. And what that basically is going to mean is that it's not purely directional. So it's not going to have super extremely harsh shadows. It's just going to have just enough to give us the implication that these are metal surfaces. So we're kind of looking at it this way. I think we need to add a little bit of light on these sort of sections, but it doesn't need to be as bright as that color that we've been using. So I'm just going to get a little bit more brigadine brown in there and just kind of work that into these areas between, but try not to get too close to those spikes that will be sort of changing some of that and casting a shadow. Okay. So now we'll just work our way up a little bit more, doing a mostly yellow pass to lighten up sort of the middle of each of these highlighted sections to their next extreme. And then what we'll do after we get through this highlight is we're going to bump some of these sections up even more with a bit of a yellow orange to really pump up the contrast. But since this is meant to be, it needs to imply some sort of atmosphere. We are really going to focus a lot of this highlight more on this side where the light is coming from and not as much on this side. So that way it does show the direction of the light. But I think for right now, actually, just going to touch a little bit more on this skull on this side, just to give it a bit more presence there. Cool. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. So now we'll just take a sec, look at this again. So this is what we've done before. So we might consider going a bit brighter here on the halo itself. Let's just do a rough fitting here, because I really want those to feel like the same material. Yeah, I think we need to push sort of this side a bit more. So just going to go back in here, do about 75-25 orange to brown. We don't want it to be too intense, right? And we can maybe pump up the intensity on the other side with some more color and kind of pushing that highlight to an even greater extreme than we've gone before. Alright, now we'll just put in a little bit more orange. We're just gonna get sort of the middle area of each of those kind of spots, just to give it a little bit of a brushed metal look. Yeah, I think that's gonna do rather nicely. Oh, yeah, and then I think I'm gonna do kind of another pass here, just with a little bit more orange, kind of focusing it more on the side that will sort of get caught by the light. A little bit more of the edge highlight as well. Okay. All right, but now I think we're at a pretty good spot to start thinking about adding in some of the yellow-orange to this guy and getting some more contrast. So I'm going to grab Flickering Flame. So it's in the oranges line. It's about a middle step here. And with this, we're basically going to mix it with the orange and not so much with the Brigadine brown that we started with. Just because at this stage we're kind of pushing past the metal and we're looking more at the light impacting the metal. And we don't really want too much brighter than this yellow-orange. So we're just going to do about a 50-50 mix here. And we're going to focus it a little bit more on the edges and the upward facing parts, but also making sure that everything still has a pretty nice transition from this color to the next. I'm going to stretch the color a bit over the edge highlights as well. Just going to help them feel a bit sharper. Yeah, I think we're getting somewhere. Just going to go back in, get some more mix going, and kind of go into this next rung here. Because obviously this is still going to be the same side, so it's going to be impacted in a very similar way. We also want to think about a little bit of the cast shadow from this stuff coming over. So these skulls will get a little bit of this extra added light, but not necessarily all of it. And then I'm just going to go onto this side with a few swipes of this brighter color, just to liven it up a bit, make sure it feels cohesive, but also keeping in that idea of this one-sided highlight. and the directional aspect of this light. So something kind of like that. Yeah. All right, and now what we're going to do is I'm actually just going to take the flickering flame, the yellow orange that we're using, and this will be sort of our final pass into some of these areas, predominantly the areas of the light hitting the absolute most. So we're just going to go in, do some edge highlights, a few stripes on some of these highlighted areas, maybe a little bit of a stripe on these spikes. And then just some specular highlights on these skulls. Okay. And as we transition over to the side opposite the light, we're just going to use a little bit less on each sort of area. Get a little bit of dry tip here, so get that. All right. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. But what we can look at now is sort of how can we improve it a little bit further. So I feel like this side is actually shaping up very nicely. I actually don't mind a little bit of roughness here. Obviously, this is armor. He would have worn this armor into battle at some point, but now it's from a story aspect. I kind of see my chapter master not really seeing the heat of battle much longer. Um, Potentially he has an injury, and now this armor is actually partially his life support as well. But for the most part, he will have to address the people and all that stuff, so it needs to look kind of nice, but maybe not be super polished and that sort of thing. But I will get the video back up and running. Sorry about that, guys. See about getting this reset. Hopefully the picture will be back in just a second, and I'll kind of do a little bit of a recap. All right, the picture should be back here in just a second. I'm just going to make sure that everything lines up properly. Awesome. So, like I was saying, I feel like the right-hand side where the light is coming from is looking pretty good, but there is some lacking on the other side, and I think what it really just needs is just some smoothing. Um, Even though we are going a little bit of this rougher style, some areas kind of right beside these spikes, we do actually want to get maybe a little bit closer with that sort of dark mid-tone. So I'm just going to go back in, grab some Brigadine and some orange. Try and get it as close as I can to that color that I have already there. This might be difficult for me to show you guys. It's a little too dark. Let me grab that, get some more orange in there. It's a little bit better. I think it might still be a little too brown. Try and stretch that a bit more. I think that's looking a little bit better. I think that might be out of focus. Let me try and make sure that stays in focus for you guys a bit better. Still kind of getting the hang of painting underneath this desk camera. So I apologize for that, everybody. All right, let's go a little bit more orange, I think. I'm gonna have a little bit more liquid in my brush just to help dilute the paint from the get-go. Yeah, there we go. Kind of push some of that in. We're gonna get right to sort of the limits here of that. Yeah. See, we have much softer edges now between these transitions, and I think that's pretty much what this area needed. And I think it could probably do well to give it a bit more of a luster. So we're gonna keep spiking it up a bit, adding a decent amount more orange. And now we'll grab a little bit of the yellow orange. Sort of touch back in those really bright brights. And there. And now I think that outer bit of the halo is about where I would want it to be for right now. I think an important thing is just, you know, there's going to be parts of models that you're not really going to like, or while you're working on them in subassembly, you might have to go back and fix some stuff a little bit later. And I think part of painting and getting, if a goal of yours is to get better at painting, is to be okay with the fact that, it doesn't have to be done before you put it all together. Because when I'm done with this portion and done with the rest of his armor pieces as a whole, I'll be assembling it and then doing some spot fixes and that sort of thing. Because that's just going to happen, right? You're going to get something done to a point like where we are kind of now with this outer halo. We're about to touch up this inner halo. And then we'll move on to the back part as well. Make sure that that is looking good and up to snuff on this, on par with this side, along with some added details we'll talk about. And then we're going to take what we learned from this and we're going to apply it onto the trim around this shoulder piece. And then after all that's said and done, I have all the other trim on the model as well. So his belt will be a piece. He also has a trim around this freehand that I'm working on that will end up being that same color. And then of course on his arms and the pauldrons around that and the little halo as well on his hammer are all going to sort of emulate this same effect. So testing it kind of on the biggest part, that will be it, is helping me learn more about how I can paint it on everything else and that sort of thing. So, yeah. And if you've recently joined the stream, welcome, welcome. I hope that you've had a great day so far, or if you're just starting your day potentially, I hope that it will be great for you. And we're basically just working on doing some painting on this. Technically, it's the Saturnine Praetor from Horus Heresy, but it will be the chapter master for my custom Space Marines chapter. I wanted to do something kind of cool to kick this project off, and what cooler than the head honcho, right? So we're working on non-metallic metal today and making sure that I'm getting the effect that I want while I'm knocking this out and learning exactly how I need to be doing these metal bits for the rest of the model. Because every project is an opportunity to do something a little bit better. And for me, this Space Marines project is basically an excuse, not that I really needed one, to push my personal painting skills to their absolute max. So what I'm doing now is this inner halo. Obviously, it's going to sort of mirror what we did above, but there are some other bits here that we'll need to touch a little bit differently. Some different types of highlight, but also having to interact a bit with the cast from the area above. So we're basically just putting all that into effect, still utilizing the same painting concepts as we did before. So now I'm basically just working up to sort of a lower mid or an upper mid highlight with the orange and yellow orange that I've been working with to amp up that contrast. I think what I need is a little bit of, I think what I need is just a little bit more color on the far side, the dark sides of these skulls, because I feel like I'm losing that dimension to them. So I'm just going to quickly mix up sort of a dark mid-tone and just brush that over that side on both of these to basically make sure that it's not, just primer black. Then we're going to light it up. We're going to make pretty big jumps here. So we're going to go like 80-20 orange to brown here, because from this angle, the tops of these skulls would be getting a good amount of light here. And then the inside of those far eye sockets will also be getting some. Now we'll basically just take straight orange, catch sort of the mid there. It's kind of an odd angle, so I apologize if this goes out of focus for you guys. We're going to go just sort of that straight orange, sort of have that shine through and down, have it affect a bit more of the skull. So now kind of an interesting thing to look at here are these skulls. See if I can get them to be in focus. So now they're being affected by the light, but they don't look metal, right? You can tell that they are a similar color to the halo itself, but they don't appear to have that shine. So now we just got to add that shine in, and because it's a sort of not really gloss-ish metal, we don't need to do too much. We're just going to push a little bit of the yellow orange onto the upper part of the skull and that lower eyelid on this side, or eye socket rather. See if I can maybe zoom in. All right, we're as close as we can get now. It's feeling a bit more metal, but I think these, there we go. I was losing those eye sockets still. Oh, there we go. Whew. Thought for a second I might have gotten a little too much water on there. All right, I still think we need a good kind of specular highlight. So I'm just going to go straight to the yellow orange. And we're just going to do a dot. We're going to do one on this side as well. There we go. I think that is good for now. Now, I worked pretty hard on this, right? So I don't want this to get messed up. So one thing I'm going to do before I go a little crazy on the other side, since I might affect this, I'm just going to grab my rattle can of matte spray. Sorry if you guys can hear that. But we're going to just do a quick spray over that just to give it a little bit of a layer of protection while I do that. Just going to do that off camera. All right. Then looks like we had a little bit of a hiccup on the feed, so let me just reset that real quick. You guys didn't really miss much. I just kind of took this off camera to give it a nice sheen. All right, are we... Sorry about that, guys. My camera's being a bit finicky. Let me see if I can disconnect and reconnect real quick. All right. Don't know if it's OBS maybe being a little funky. Let me do this. Feels a bit like my cam link is getting kind of warm. I think I might have to look at upgrading that at some point in the future. Okay, that seems to have done it. It might take a second for it to show up for you guys, so I'll wait to start sharing any more details until I see that come through the live feed. All right. So now we should be good. You guys should be seeing my camera. But basically, all I did was take a little bit of rattle can matte varnish. So just some Krylon matte finish. Although I will say this, as much as it is easy to use those, they are getting quite expensive nowadays. And I do have an airbrush, so I think at some point very, very soon, I will likely be swapping to airbrush varnish just to save some money, um, if not at a little bit expense of my time. But I do think that this side is good to be done for now. Um, I'm really pleased with that effect. But let's take a look at the other side. So the other side is actually quite interesting. So some of the details here that you can see are these little kind of like stems and bubbles that are not present on the other side. So these appear to be shield generation kind of deals. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint kind of everything around it in that metal color, but then we're going to go back in and we're going to highlight those with the energy color for this guy, which is sort of a neon desaturated kind of green. So for starters, we're going to do the same sort of deal we've been doing with the non-metallic metal. So we already coated with our brigadine. So we're going to grab our orange and brigadine and make us a bit of a nice mid-tone. And now we're going to be doing basically the opposite side, right? So we're going to focus on, oh, I'm going to move him out of the way because I think it's trying to focus on him. And now the light, I mean, it's not actually, but it's going to feel as though the light is coming from sort of the opposite direction. So we're kind of going to be thinking about it in that way. So now it's the left-hand side that will be getting more of the love here. So just kind of working in those middle areas. Since this side is going to have more of the light, we're not going to keep too much of the brigadine around. We're just going to focus on getting the midpoint up. And then on this side, since this is the side opposite the light, we will kind of start thinking about where these spikes are going to be casting their shadows a bit. Obviously, it is more of an ambient light. You know, it's sort of like a mid-afternoon sun. But that being said, we still would experience some amount of cast shadows on some of these, and that's just going to help the overall effect. So we're going to basically highlight all the way up to the edges from the side of the light, but then on the opposing side, we'll let the shadow kind of fall. So almost to the point of a, second base coat, but kind of covering about 80% of it. So kind of working our way around here. We also got to get the inner ring worked out. So in a similar way, we just have to think about the light from this being impacted by the outer ring. So these sort of support struts won't necessarily have a ton of highlights right up underneath those. So we just think about that as we put this in. Now we'll take a little bit more orange. Sort of repeat the process. We're going to just cover up a little bit less every time. And personally, I prefer a bit more of a kind of painterly effect here. So you'll notice that I use a bit more kind of hatching techniques when I'm mixing it for more of an optical blend, not so much a like wet blend or anything like that. And it's a little bit about speed, I think, but it's also from sort of my background as a traditional artist in school. I really preferred working with like pens and inks in more of a hatching kind of style. And actually, ironically, wasn't much of a painter in school. Um, I actually ended up doing sort of a pen and ink for my final for my senior painting class, which thankfully I had great teachers, a wonderful teacher, Canaris, that supported me in that. And he just sort of realized that I wasn't as much of a painter as some of the other guys in the class. And we just sort of worked that out. And yeah, still a great time. And I still carry a lot of fond memories of those classes, and especially with my old classmates who are, most of them are fantastic artists today, actually making names for themselves and that sort of thing. And I don't say that in any kind of ire or anything like that. I want them to succeed even more than myself. And that just wasn't the route that I ended up taking. All right. Looks like we're having some more issues. Let's see if we can just deactivate and reactivate through on OBS. All right, it should be coming back here in just a sec. And if you are recently joining the stream, welcome, welcome. Let me know what you're working on today on your painting desk or building desk, whatever you might have need of. Um, Kind of the hope of these streams is basically just giving people a place to sort of hang out, maybe learn a little something about painting along the way, and just get to know some other hobbyists and that sort of thing. So if you're working on something, feel free to drop what you're working on in the chat or in the comments if you're watching this after we're live. And maybe you can join the next one. We go live every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And we try and stream for about 2 hours. I am still working out some kinks with my streaming software and hardware, so I apologize if we experience some pauses and drops and that sort of thing. I am working on getting some of that fixed and making sure that I'm still providing you guys with good content. So I think we might be getting a bit warm today because everything seems to want to overheat. So let me unplug my stream link, see if we can cool that down, and hopefully work out the rest of this stream today. All right. should be back in just a sec. Just waiting for YouTube to kick back in. All right. So let's just take a sec, look at our progress. So this is roughly the effect that we're going for. Trying to find our way back or way up to this similar appearance on the back half. So we're probably about halfway there, honestly. One thing that happened on the front side that you guys may remember is on the opposing light side, so the dark side, if you will. We ended up with some pretty rough looking shadows and whatnot. So I'm going to actually try and be a little bit more keen to that and get those mixed up and softened now. So that way we won't really have to go back. So just going to work on them for a sec, get them sort of up to stuff. And then we'll continue on with our next batch of highlights. Now, one thing that we talked about when I flipped it over are these little like force field nodes that are hidden back here. We're not going to worry so much about those while we're getting this base metallic down, because we are going to end up kind of painting over some of those with the colors that we need to make that happen. But in general, our metal is still going to be impacted a bit more by the environmental effects than those little lights there. So, all right, I think that's pretty good for that stage. Let's just work up a bit more. So we're about at the stage of about 80% orange, 20% brown. So now we're going to go back through, basically hit the areas that need a bit more to go through. And one thing with metal, non-metallic metal that is you're going to be working on smaller and smaller areas as you go through. So as you get brighter, less and less of it will be painted. Now there are some kind of caveats and exceptions to that rule. For example, if you're doing like a metallic cube or other, flat-faced object that has something that directly is facing the brightest part of your light source, that area is probably going to be, 90 to 100% your brightest color, because especially if it's a very reflective metal that you're going for, that's just how the light is going to be interacting with that. But for ours purposes, this metal is it's definitely metallic, so it does shine in the light, but it's more of a little bit more of a worn metal. Something like an ornamental kind of metal, like you might see on some decorations at your grandmother's house or your parents' house, something that sort of stays up on the shelf and isn't really used very often. Much like a chapter master who has different duties than the standard Marines. All right, and now we're basically 100% orange. So we're just going to go back through, just give a few areas a touch, a few swipes of this brighter orange to help pump it up. And work our way around. Okay, looks like my I do think that it might be my cam link that's just getting extra hot. I think I might just need to figure out a way to ventilate back here a bit more just to make sure that it is staying cool. So I'll probably try and brainstorm some ways to do that. Or if you have any ideas and you're watching this and may have experienced similar issues, please let me know in the chat or comments. I'd love to get some advice on that. I'm hoping that it'll be back here in just a sec, so if not, okay, there we go. Now we're back in business. All right. So I'm out of orange, which is to kind of be expected given the amount that we're using. Add a little bit more to my wet palette. And we were on strict orange just a second ago. So our next bit, we're going to be doing some orange mixed with our yellow orange, just to brighten it up. All right, and now's where we get a lot more sparse with our highlights, because we just need it in some of the most middling kind of areas. All right, guys, I really apologize for this. I don't know. It appears to be something with my hardware, unfortunately, because my connection seems to be just fine. So I think if we end up continuing to have some more issues, we might have to cut the stream short today, which would be a bummer, but not really sure what else to do here. Get that back in. Reactivate. Okay. So, like I was saying, um, once again, sorry for some of the stream issues, guys. We're working our hardest to try and make some good content for you, but I think some of my equipment may have gone the way of the dodo, and I might need to look at doing some upgrades. So hopefully we can make that happen at the somewhat near future, but I think we're gonna make it work for right now. So with this sort of middle high mix with the yellow, orange, and orange, we're gonna just work that into some of these areas that are more facing the light to try and get the desired effect. A little bit more. Then we'll go on this inner curvature. Just like that. A little bit of highlight work. Just like that. So from this, so the front side, probably see it a little bit better on that darker background, to this. I feel that's a pretty convincing effect and sort of what I'm going for. So we'll just take a quick sec, kind of snap or set that into place so we can see him a bit more in what we'd expected to see. This thing's so finicky. All right, looks like it's gonna stay. So, well, right as I say it, huh? Oh yeah. I feel like it gives a similar effect to the bit on his face, so that ties it in together nicely. And then I still got to work on the silver non-metallics here on the back, but we'll probably be working in some of this orangey metallic as well, just to help tie it all together. All right, but I think we will go ahead and start working on some of these lights and baubles now. So one thing I am going to do before anything else is I'm going to downsize my brush because these are a lot smaller and it's just going to make my life a lot easier. And let's see. It'll be best if we work on some of these kind of bracket bits and the lines between them. So I think what I'm going to start with is I'm going to mix up kind of a dark gray. So I'm sure if you're into the hobby, one thing that's really frustrating is this is about as dark a gray as you can find pre-mixed. So I basically am always having to do a little bit of mixing with some black to get sort of the desired starting point of a dark gray. So we're just gonna I do not need a lot because really this is only going to be on the kind of little fringe pieces there as we're going around. So, oh, I think we paused again. Sorry about that, guys. Let's see if we can get one more stretch before we call it for the night. Okay. Looks like it's working through OBS. Just gotta wait for YouTube to catch back up. And then we should be good to go. I'll keep an eye on it. And so like I was saying is we're gonna take the deep gray and matte black. We're gonna mix it not really 50-50. We actually want a little bit more black. And then I'm gonna get nice and close here because this is gonna be a test of patience. Just gonna try to work that into the bits here and the little brackets that go over. Trying to paint it in a way that you guys are able to still see it. So it's just this is a very close knit and tight process, so I'm trying to get as close as I can to it without shaking the camera too much. And an important note about this is like this isn't the final step here. We're gonna kind of paint over this bit with this darker color first, and then we're just gonna go in with straight deep gray to give it a highlight to sort of emulate a silver color. And then we'll work on the glow effects for the other stuff. Okay. It looks like it goes a little bit onto this side. Okay. Downside to using a smaller brush is just holds less paint, so the paint dries a little faster, but being patient and not rushing will go a very long way. For your projects in this way. Okay. Let's see. I think we got kind of all that we need with that color. So now we're going to go back in with just straight deep gray. So that's the, the darkest gray that you can get. And we're going to go over really just the kind of little bracket bits that are on here to do a little bit of silver non-metallic metal, but it's not going to really be as obvious with these. And it doesn't really need to be. I mean, this is basically just some pieces of hardware in the grand scheme of things. But I am gonna get the, oh, sorry about that, guys. Looks like it froze up again. So I think I'll try and get at least this part done, but I think we might be calling it a night after this next stretch. So I want to thank everybody that joined us tonight. I know that stream mishaps can definitely be frustrating and that sort of thing, so I appreciate anyone that stuck around this whole time or has, made it through the end of rewatching it. But we're gonna take a sec, try and get the next stage of highlights on these little hardware bits before we call it good, and then we'll take a look at the progress we made today and do it that way. So I'm going to take deep gray and brigade gray. So these are both within the blacks and grays line from Army Painter. We're going to mix them about 50-50. We don't want this too bright because it will start to compete with the work we did with the metal earlier. But we really just need little marks on the raised bits to make them stand out. And I might need to go back in later, pick these out, clean this up a bit, but that's just to be expected with these sorts of things. Now I'm going to go back with just the brigade gray. I'm going to paint this over the actual little shield nodes. Because what we'll do, or what I'll be doing probably over the weekend or over the next week, is painting in the glow effects. And you'll be able to see that. I'll probably make a reel or some posts about doing that aspect of it for this over on my Instagram. which is at Elderwood Minis. There's a link in the description to that. Also, if you've enjoyed what you've been able to see today, um, there is also an Amazon affiliate link that links to a list of my most used hobby products available on Amazon. Using that link will help me out. It is an affiliate link. It doesn't change what you pay, but it does give me a little bit of a kickback. And that sort of thing will help me be able to do this longer term, maybe be able to buy some more equipment to be able to service you guys a bit better on here. But yeah, I think just to avoid any final freeze ups and that sort of thing, I'm just going to kind of review the work that we did today. So, um, yeah, we did a good amount. Basically, when this started, we just had a little bit of orange on this side, but we've been able to push it all the way up to this sort of orangey copper kind of color, which is pretty much exactly the color that I was looking for. I find it really striking with the teal, so I am really enjoying it. And I hope you guys learned something. I know that I did. I know messing around, messing up a couple times and fixing it really does help me learn quite a lot. But we got that side done, and then we also managed to get this side done. Now, I do think I will be going back in on this side, maybe cleaning up some of the orange and that sort of thing. I don't think it's as impactful as the front. Um, so there's some areas that I think could use some cleaning up. Now that we've kind of picked out some of the other fiddly bits, I'll be a little bit more careful to sort of paint around those, just so that way I don't have to repaint those again and over again. But overall, I am super stoked with this. I can't wait to see what this effect is going to look like with the other trims and that sort of thing. Basically, all the trim work around the teal is going to be in the same way, similar to his helmet here. And I do think, well, the Iron Halo is a little bit darker. I think that's fine. I think having it sort of having the face one be a little bit brighter draws some more attention to it. So I think it'll end up working out in the long run. But this has been a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot and having a great time kind of pushing my limits in painting. And if that's something that you're into and you want to experience more of that or just hang out on these streams, maybe learn a little bit or give some feedback and that sort of thing, uh, we'll continue trying to stream every Thursday night at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll try and go for a couple hours, but we might cut short just depending on what's going on with some of the software, or in this case, we're also getting a storm rolling in. So I'll be wrapping up here. If you want more frequent updates, you can check me out on Instagram at Elderwood Minis. A link to that is in the description and a link tree. It also includes an Amazon link to an affiliate or a list of my hobby supplies, which is an affiliate link. So buying anything through that link helps as well. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Later, guys.